Now, here was the question. If remember the thing we looked at before, if the government banned point-of-sale advertising or imposed very high restrictions on the sale of alcohol, because at this point in time, there were a lot of issues of young people drinking to excess and getting involved in automobile accidents and killing a lot of people. So there was a lot of political pressure being raised to impose more restrictive rules and regulations on the marketing of beer. Now, the argument from the chairman of the board, Bill Coors, was that if those restrictions were so significant that we could no longer gain 50% of our gross sales from the sale of beer, what kind of firm could we be at that point using existing resources within the company? What kind of firm could we or would we have to become in order to stay in business, okay? And again, obviously at what output levels. So this is really an interesting question, okay? One that I've had a lot of experience with, and as we go through this, if we come back to it, we'll talk about some of my experiences at the Adolph Coors Company. But I just really love this question here. And I think remember when we talked earlier on about sustainability and changes in economics, remember you're always asking this question as the market change, as demand change, as supply change, as technology change, as rules and regulation, as government changes. You know, should we continue to be in this line of business? Should we not begin to, and this is strategy, should we not begin to look at being in some other line of business? Okay. It didn't change. I'll try one more time. Okay, well, we'll switch over here. I'll click it from over here. Okay. And then here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We will be talking about competitive advantage, cost leader, product differentiation, all of this. But let me just make a quick statement at this point, and we will come back to this, and I will give you a lot more explanation and defense here. But in terms of competitive advantage, in my opinion, and again, you don't have to agree with me, but I think you do have to be able to sort of answer the question, how do we obtain a competitive advantage? And what's important, okay, what's very important here, I think I lost my marker, but that's okay. What's very important here, all right, is here, okay, on the issue of competitive advantage, it's not only how do I get it, it's also importantly how do I sustain it. So how do I get a competitive advantage, but also how do I sustain that competitive advantage? It's not enough to get, you've got to sustain. Now, just by way of an enticement of a lost leader or whatever here in terms of market niche, here's my opinion. There are only two ways to obtain a competitive advantage and then sustain it. The first way, so I want to highlight that for you. So again, here, this is the crucial question in my mind. How do I get that, okay? And then how do I sustain it? Two ways in my opinion, okay? First, you can do what's called or develop what's called a cost position. What that means is relative to your competition, you can provide the same level of value. And what I mean by that is benefit to price. So value to me is benefit to price. You can provide that same value ratio at a lower cost. So can you get a competitive advantage and can you sustain that competitive advantage over a long period by taking this, quote, cost position? The answer is yes, in my opinion. The second way you can do it, the second approach, okay, is what I call a differentiation position. And what that means is the following. Relative to your competitors, relative to the competition, you can provide slightly more benefit to price at a slightly higher cost, okay? And if you do that, can you maintain a competitive, can you develop a competitive advantage? Yes, you can. And can you maintain that competitive advantage over time? The answer is yes, you can. And we're going to come back to this, particularly as we get towards the latter part of our time together when we look at strategy and game theory, okay? All right, I'm just going to walk over here and not click that screen. I'll just click it over here. Okay, questions managers ask again. You'll go over the shifts in demand and supply. We're going to pay attention to that competition. Interest rates and inflation. Again, the reason I want to just quickly mention something here, all right, is that we don't have time to cover everything together in our class. So one of the things that I want you to pay attention to as you through your EMBA, and particularly as you get into the finance part of this, the corporate finance part of this, then in terms of cash flow management and your risk position, exchange rates and all of that, those are issues that you do indeed want to bring up in that finance class that you'll be taking. Okay? We're going to really pay more attention to this question here and this question here, indirectly this one, but if you have a technology, again, know whether you're going to have that talks about technology, but that's certainly something we're not going to have time to look at, okay, in our time together. All right. Risk, I'm just going to say something brief about risk, an important idea, of course, but there's two issues I want you to pay attention to here. There's risk, and then there's uncertainty. Risk means that there's actual outcomes to which you can assign probability. So the risk is the probability. Risk essentially, there's an outcome at some point in time in the future where the probability of that outcome is not 100%. Okay? That's important. Now, uncertainty, which is the more troublesome aspect and which is oftentimes more what you face, is that there is an outcome out there, but you can't assign a probability to it in the future. Normally, how we face uncertainty is try to take these issues of uncertainty as we look down the road at our markets. And this is one of the things, too, we're going to come back to later on when we look at cost. I'm an economist, so I'm going to give you a classic example here. I'm an economist. To me, cost is not looking backwards. Cost is looking forwards. What I want to know as an economist is what are the things that drive my cost? What are the risks associated with those? How do I control them? But not in the past, but in the future. So when I roll out my new product line in this new market niche, what are my costs going to be? What are those cost drivers going to be? And what's the nature of the risk associated with that? Okay, so that's something that we're not going to have tons of time to talk about. Hopefully, again, that's the issue that you will come back to when you're looking at your class on in finance. You'll talk a little bit about risk and uncertainty. Remember, again, the idea here is risk is quantifiable with a probability. Uncertainty is unquantifiable. Okay, I don't know the probability that something would happen. Okay, and the aspects of business, again, competition, technology, and our customers. We will spend more time talking about customers and competition. Okay, this will work. Yes, it did. Now, your book talks about a four-stage model change. I'm not going to spend much time at all, so we're going to breeze through that very quickly. You can read that as well as I can. The four stages are, as they point out here, stage one, the good old days. Stage two is crisis. Stage three is reform. And stage four is recovery. I'm quite confident that you will talk about all of that in your management and change management course and organizational behavior courses as you work through your MBA.